Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Ridorana Lighthouse. This is the new 24-man Alliance raid made available by patch 4.3 in Final Fantasy XIV, Under the Moonlight. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need a strong back to carry this lighthouse, but you may need a calculator. My name is Ms. Tech and I'll be your raid guide. We begin immediately with FAMFRIT, the Darkening Cloud. He will target the main tank with Tide Pod, and since it's obviously not a good idea to eat these, it'll deal high damage. Shield and heal through this as necessary. Water 4 is a raid-wide AoE blast. Healers be ready to top everyone off. BRINY CANNONADE will target players with these circle markers. Affected players should move away from others to avoid excess overlap of damage. One of FAMFRIT's trickiest attacks is TSUNAMI. This will deal raid-wide damage and knock back all players from the boss. He will then spin his EWER in a specific direction, pouring water towards that side of the platform. Getting caught in this wave will deal massive damage and probably kill you if you can't make it out in time. To avoid this completely, always keep an eye on his EWER and quickly move out of the way it ends up pointing. Players will also need to watch out for Dark Rain, these large circle AoEs that target and follow random players in each alliance. As you dodge these, you'll also need to continue avoiding the EWER Tsunami attacks. Dark EWER will first spawn 3 EWERs in a row around the outer edge of the arena. Each of these EWERs will begin to move in a straight line across the platform through the very center. Keeping this movement in mind will allow you to dodge these as necessary. The second Dark EWER cast will spawn 3 EWERs on tracks that move around the platform in set circles. There will be an EWER moving in a circle in the very center, one at mid-range and one at max range. Dodge these as well to avoid excess damage. When the boss casts Darkening Rainfall, 3 large water puddles and 3 dark rain adds will spawn around the platform. Avoid the water puddles as necessary and split each alliance up to handle each add. These adds must be destroyed before they explode, or you will suffer from high damage and a stacking magic vulnerability up debuff. During this time, players can also be marked up with these familiar Dorito markers. Affected players will need to stack with at least one other player to share damage and avoid getting knocked into the air. Once the adds explode or are destroyed, the boss will cast Water 4. This is very dangerous with stacks of magic vulnerability, so make sure each alliance quickly splits up to destroy each add in time. Immediately after is another Tsunami cast. The water puddles on the ground do persist for some time here, so make sure you don't get knocked back into one. Keep an eye on his spinning EWER and make sure you dodge the waves as necessary, all while handling the same incoming AoE attacks appropriately. The water puddles will eventually disappear and each mechanic will repeat with some overlap. Eventually, the boss will cast another Darkening Rainfall, this time summoning 4 water puddles. Split up to handle each add as necessary. Don't forget to stack with your friends if you're marked for Doritos. Continue handling each mechanic in the same manner until the boss is down. In the next section, we face a few packs of trash. Each tank can grab a boon, and should be ready to grab enmity on each pack of Barmu that spawns once the boons die. Each Barmu will explode for high raid damage when it is destroyed, so be careful not to kill them all at the same time. Healers be ready with shields, heals, and cooldowns. The second boss is BELIAS, the GIGAS. Fire will target the primary target for high damage. Cool down and be ready to heal. Fire 4 will deal raid-wide damage. Heal through this as necessary as well. When he casts Time Eruption, each square section of the platform will light up with either a quickly spinning clock face or a slowly spinning clock face. The quickly spinning clocks will explode first, followed shortly after by the slower clocks. To avoid damage and debuffs, players should stand in the slow clocks, wait for the fast clocks to explode, and then move into the safe zones created to avoid the slow explosion. BELIAS will disappear and 2 clones will appear on the edge of the platform facing different directions. 2 directional markers will also appear in their paths, indicating that each clone will turn in that direction. Players will need to quickly determine which direction each clone is facing, take into account which direction they will turn in, and find a safe section to stand in, out of the way of the rushing clones to avoid damage and debuffs. During Hand of Time, a number of nails will spawn on the platform and tether to specific players. These tethered players will receive a slow and stacking fire debuff based on their distance to the tethered nail. To handle this, tethered players will need to move away from their nail to reduce their fire debuff to only 1 stack. All other players will need to avoid the tethers of each affected player. Getting clotheslined by one of these will stun you for what feels like an eternity. Be on the lookout for these large AoE circles that target the ground under specific players. Move out of these as necessary. Eventually, BELIAS will become invulnerable, begin to charge up his mana, and spawn 3 GIGAS adds. These adds will tether and buff each other if they are too close. Have each alliance split up and drag each add apart. Once all the adds are destroyed, BELIAS will cast his ultimate, cooldown shield, and heal through this as necessary. Time Bomb will spawn 4 clocks around the intersection of the platform. The hands of these clocks determine which section of the platform will be targeted for a large AoE. Players can step into these clocks to change the direction the hand is pointing, ultimately changing which section of the platform gets targeted for the AoE. This can be tricky as more mechanics begin to overlap, but a good rule of thumb is to ensure that the hands are pointing to areas already affected by other AoEs, allowing players to form safe areas to easily dodge mechanics. As the fight continues, you'll notice a lot of these mechanics overlap, but the general handling of each remains the same. The trickiest combos involve the rushing clones and quickly determining where the safe zones are, all while handling other mechanics that may affect the natural safe zones. All of these mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. In this section, each alliance will handle a set of adds. You'll have a short time to destroy each golem before they activate. Once active, you can just stack them all together and burn it all down. The next wave of adds may become tethered to ancient clockwork devices and gain buffs. Destroy the devices first. The third boss is Construct 7. Before the pull, make sure you equip your thinking cap, because you're going to need it. Destroy is a heavy-hitting tank buster. Cooldown and heal through this as necessary. Accelerate will mark up one player with a stack-up marker, and others with large circle AoEs. If you're not affected by a circle AoE marker, make sure you stack near the boss to share the damage of Accelerate. Pulverize will deal high damage and debuff anyone caught in melee range. This is immediately followed by Compress, a long column AoE attack. Avoid these as necessary. The boss may disappear and reappear on the edge of the platform, while a number of construct cogs spawn around the platform. These cogs will target the ground beneath them with lightning, dealing damage and debuffing anyone caught in them. The boss will also cast Ignite, running across the platform in a straight line in front of him. To avoid all of this, players will first need to move out of the path of the boss while avoiding the blue lightning circles. Immediately after, a proximity marker will spawn in the center, and players will be targeted for more AoE circles. Spread these circles apart while moving to the edges of the platform to avoid excess damage. Once the boss slams back down, he will begin to cast Dispose. All players must immediately get behind him, and get ready to stay behind him as he turns to blast the platform. Getting caught in this attack will probably kill you, so make sure you quickly get behind and stay behind him the entire time. Next up, he will enter Computation mode. Remember that time your teacher insisted that you would use what you learned in math class in the real world? Well, here is a prime example. The boss will cast Subtract, which will cause every player's HP pool to become a single digit from 1 to 8. You'll also notice 4 circle patterns on the ground, each of which have a specific number of gears in it from 1 to 4. Standing in a gear circle will add that number to your HP pool. Standing outside of a gear circle will of course not affect the value of your HP. The boss will then yell out a specific set of instructions that each player and their health pool must obey. The instructions will be calibrating your vitals to be either a multiple of a specific number or a prime number. This can be different every time, so make sure you're paying attention to either the chat box, the boss's emotes, or the cast bar showing divide by X or indivisible. Doing this correctly will give you a computation buff, which increases your damage output for the rest of the encounter. Doing it incorrectly will obviously put you at a disadvantage. The boss will ask for 2 calibrations before your health debuff drops off and this mini phase is over. Healers will need to be ready to top everyone off here before the next Incinerate cast, or you will die to the incoming raid-wide damage. Next, the boss will enter Tartarus mode, creating a large black hole that sucks everyone in. Once inside, each alliance will land on a platform and face the Construct 7.1 add. Each platform and add will throw out a specific mechanic. If you're in Alliance A, you'll need to deal with polarity, like tethers stack up and opposite tethers move away from each other. If you're in Alliance B, you'll need to dodge missiles that move across the platform. If you're in Alliance C, you'll be afflicted with acceleration bombs. Make sure you stop attacking as the debuff falls off. Each alliance will need to quickly destroy their construct add before time runs out, or you will be locked out and killed. Once your add is down, you'll need to jump into the center orb to be returned back to the boss. At this point, the boss will enter Annihilation mode. In this mode, the attacks from the first phase are a little bit more involved, but the principles remain the same. Avoid each AoE as necessary. Another Computation mode. Check to see what your health is, and get ready to adjust your health pool as necessary for both commands. He will disappear, and players will need to avoid his path while dodging the lightning circles. More players will be marked for these large AoE circles, and make sure you continue to spread them apart. Move to the edges to reduce damage, and then get right on his butt for Dispose. In this mode, Dispose lasts longer, so don't be fooled and make sure you're on his butt for the entire duration of the attack. At this point, you won't have to worry about any more computation modes, and these basic mechanics will repeat until the boss is down. He has a fair amount of health, so doing math correctly during each computation mode will help you quite a bit here. The last boss is Yasmat. Rake is a heavy-hitting tank buster on the primary target. Cooldown and heal through this as necessary. Players can be targeted for a number of Dark Gale circles. Move out of these as well. Anytime he rears up, all players need to ensure that they're out from in front of him to avoid high damage, petrifaction, and vulnerability up debuffs. Dust Storm will deal raid-wide damage. Heal through this as necessary. White Breath will target the entire platform except the inside of his hitbox. Make sure to run in to avoid this anytime he casts it. Magnetic Lysis will apply a positive or negative debuff on all players and divide the platform into a positive or negative magnetic field. Standing in the same field as your debuff will cause you to levitate, which can be detrimental to your health in the future. Players will need to ensure that they're standing in the opposite magnetic field to their debuff. You'll also need to make sure you avoid AoE circles and the boss's rear attack at this time. Eventually, the magnetic field and debuffs will disappear. The boss can cast a variation of Rake signified by these large directional markers. You'll need to identify the direction he's raking in and get out of the way, especially when he starts to turn. Continue to avoid the AoE attacks as necessary. The boss will cast Summon, and 3 wind sprites will tether to 3 players. These wind sprites will target their tethered players with large column attacks. Destroy these as quickly as possible, and if you're tethered, try to stand in such a way as to bait the column attacks away from the raid. Another magnetic lysis phase will occur, and players will need to be on the lookout for the stack up marker to share the damage of DEATHSTRIKE. The magnetic fields will disappear again, and the boss will cast Cyclone. Anyone that is caught levitating here will be killed by the Cyclone. As long as you're not levitating, you'll be thrown around and dropped back on the platform for moderate damage. Eventually, the boss will move to the center, become immune, start charging up his mana, and summons 3 adds. Each alliance will split up and destroy their add as quickly as possible. Watch out for the large AoE attacks as you do this and be ready to stack if necessary. Once all of the adds are down, the heart of the dragon will become vulnerable. Destroy this as quickly as possible to deal high damage to Yasmat. Next, you'll need to cool down, shield, and heal through his Solar Storm ultimate blast. At this point, the mechanics will repeat with some overlap. Avoid all of the AoE attacks and make sure you don't float during each magnetic phase. The AoE attacks can be tricky to see during this time, so stay on your toes and be ready to handle each accordingly. Eventually, he will cast Growing Threat, giving him a damage up buff. At this point, players will need to be extra careful to avoid each attack, as they will obviously do more damage. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into the new Extreme Primal. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.